Hello, I'm Isabel from Mind Body Education, and I'm here today with Julianne Salter from the Soulful Mind College. And Julianne has been a very important part of Mind Body Education for many, many years now, and has been teaching the Mind Body Education courses for many, many years as well, both through the meditation program and the HiCAT program. Welcome, Julianne. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, Isabel. How are you going?
I'm really well, thank you. And you?
Good.
That's good. Julianne and I are here today to create this little video to help anybody who's thinking about teaching their courses via Zoom. Obviously, in this new era that we find ourselves in, teaching face-to-face has become very difficult for many people in many locations. And thankfully, we have Zoom, and what a wonderful time Zoom came into our lives. So now, Zoom is a really great way for people to run live classes without having to actually gather people into any venues or anything like that. So you can teach in people's homes, but still create a classroom environment. And Julianne's become quite a specialist on that. Haven't you, Julianne? Tell us about what you've been doing with Zoom.
Well, I started with teaching the HiCAT last year on Zoom, and I'm just developing how I'll actually deliver it on Zoom, like as face-to-face, and how I would actually get the students to actually really delve deep actually into all the activities, and actually how that I could actually hold space with them in a therapeutic way, and they would actually get the full benefits of the amazing tools and techniques throughout HiCAT. So I have taught and teach now the same way that I actually teach face-to-face. I've just had to change it up a little bit. So like the 9:30 to the 12 o'clock time slot is all when we do theory and unpacking and questions and answers, and we have open discussions, we have scenarios and all of that. And then from 12 to 2, it's lunchtime, and then the students go off and do their practicals that are in the class, the modules. And then when they come back from 2 to 3, it's presentation and reflection time, and they get to share their stories, and they get allowed space for them to be heard. And then we actually go through homework, and I always close with a beautiful meditation and close the class.
Fantastic. That sounds great. So when you begin doing this, do you set up class guidelines like you would in a physical classroom?
Yes. So,
okay.
Yeah.
What sort of guidelines do you use that might be different from teaching in a face-to-face environment?
To ensure that they have a quiet environment, so there's no kids. They're not eating breakfast, or if they are, just to have their microphones actually off as well. Making sure their internet connection is good and it's not cutting out, making sure they've downloaded the Zoom app, making sure they're really organised. So it's actually putting the ownership actually on the students too, that they've got to get themselves organised. They've got to print their own material. They've got to have their art supplies all set up. So it's teaching them to actually start setting up the workshops as well, and getting themselves organised as well. Mobile phones to be switched off. Making sure that they have, their water and their tea, so they're not running off. And I do the same thing of call your break, so they're allowed to. So if someone needs to go to the toilet, we call a break and we all go off, and then we have a toilet break. And then I always ask the students every intake, and we actually set some actual class guidelines to what would they like from their class. And always it's about acceptance and not judgmental space, and, to be creative in their own way. So we get talking about that. And so, it's pretty basic guidelines, but it's, and microphones off.
And they're really important guidelines too, aren't they? One of the things that I like to do as well is to make sure that everybody has a gallery view. Some people don't realise that you can see everybody in the classroom, and they think that they just can see the speaker. So I really like to take people up to the top up there with the view and get them to click on the view and have a gallery view, so that they can see their classmates and everybody reacting. I really think that's an important way of creating that being in a group atmosphere. I think if there's just one person and we just sort of have it like, I'm going to do it right now, where we're just doing speaker, and can you just see me? Because I can only just see you. So there's just that one person there. But then once we go back into that gallery view, then it's much more connected. And I think people get that idea about, you know, being part of a group, which is what we're really trying to organise, isn't it? And I like that idea about, you know, mobile phones off and stuff like that. I also like to send people an email beforehand and ask them to check that their camera is working, that their microphone is working, and that their speakers are working, because it can be super disruptive, can't it, to be there and just one person can't get their camera to work. And so, you know, they're like doing all this stuff for ages. Can you see me now? Can you see me now? You know, yeah. And and having people mute when they're not actually. Yeah, these are great habits to develop with people. Okay, so it's like I guess the code of conduct for how to use Zoom. And I guess an important part of running a class on Zoom in that very first beginning setting up course guidelines, kind of class guidelines, part of it is helping people that might not have the experience with Zoom to learn how to use it, at least in that basic level of, you know, being able to see the gallery, use their microphone and so on. So when you come to presenting curriculum, what do you do? Because, you know, sometimes in a classroom, there's lots of different ways we can present curriculum, right? And I think every teacher's begun, and I know that there was a point in time where I would stand there and read out the module and, you know, you'd sort of like do what's on the page. But I really struggle with that. And a lot of the time, I think that could also be because I wrote it. So like to sort of, you know, reread what I wrote. So I often have sort of, and I know that, you know, you've been in my classroom many times, and what I often do is kind of get people to go ahead and read it. You know, just everybody go and read it. And whether you read it, sometimes I get people to read it on their own, and I say, you know, read until you get to this section or in page 15 or whatever. Or sometimes I send people off in groups of 2 or more to read it together, which is a little bit trickier on Zoom, but there are, of course, the use of breakout rooms can be used for that. And then I like to get people to come back once they've read it and share with me information about how that affected them. And one of the things that I'm going to see if I can actually do this. I'm trying to remember how to do a whiteboard. So have you used a whiteboard on?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, and I should know how to do it. So I guess that I'm probably not going to do it right at the moment. It's a little bit tricky, but it's very easy to do once you figure out how to do it. And I can't believe that I can't do it. So sorry about that. But there's a whiteboard that you can use. And so you can do lots of things like, I will find it in a minute, but then you can do lots of things like asking people to tell them a comment or a question that came up for them when they were using or when they were reading through the module or the work, so that it becomes a lot more interactive and people have some sort of presentation that they need to make. And just before I find out about how you do it, one thing that I like to do sometimes too is to send people off with a piece of information, read to page 20, read about a specific piece of information, and then I ask them to pretend that they're going to give a presentation at a festival, like the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival or something like that, and they've only got 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and that they need to go away, read the bit of information and create a presentation. I love it because people come back and they do their presentations. And so if you've got 10 students, you've got that one piece of information being presented back to the group in 10 different ways. So that really helps it sink in for everybody and all the different learning styles. And it also gives the student a reason to kind of read the information and really dig something out of that that's valuable to them. And another thing that it does is it starts to give them that experience of, one, putting programs together, and secondly, speaking to a group. So that's one of the things I like to do. So how about you? What are the kind of, you know, methods that you use to get people to?
So when I send them the module, I go through and I'm a very big class planner. So I plan the class and that, and then I will get them to read a certain section of the modules by themselves, and I actually ask them to do questions and write some questions that they would actually like to bring to class and actually share. And then we go through the sections that I really feel that to discuss and really actually unpack in class. And I allow all the students to actually read out loud, because it actually helps them with self-esteem and confidence, and it helps them to develop their public speaking skills as well. Because, and I say to them, even though we're just in a classroom, we are all talking, you know, we are doing public speaking, and it's actually going to assist you when you can actually read out loud. You get used to your voice, and you actually, so you probably do fall in love with your voice, because we're, you know, and it's that you can actually believe in yourself and deliver, and not go listen to your voice and go, oh, I don't like how I speak. So it's all about that. And there's other times that I have done, it depends really on the module that I ask them to come back and do a presentation. And I would do that like when they've got their modules, because I always send their modules 3 days before a class. So it gives them plenty of time to do anything that I actually ask before they actually come to actually class. And I've just found that actually really works really well.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I like that, because it saves you time in your actual classroom, doesn't it? Because you haven't got to go through, you know, all of the whole module, because people have already had a chance. So you can, the main reading of it's already been done before they come into the classroom. Yeah, that's really fantastic. What sort of problems have you encountered in teaching on Zoom?
The only problems that I've had is when we were actually, a lot of them are homeschooling, which I had to be very considerate too, and it was just that the distractions and stuff. So that's probably just one of the, you have to sort of be adaptable when everyone was actually homeschooling. I actually haven't had many problems with actually Zoom, and I do believe that's come down to class guidelines and actually bringing people back in. It's like having, you know, the waffle bell and all of that, bringing people back in and not allowing. And I do have like a schedule that I like to stick to as well, which actually teaches the students too that they just can't walk in and go in. They've got a plan, and they've got to realize that everyone's time's actually really important, and to stick with a schedule that they actually get the most benefit out of it too, in the time frame that's allocated throughout the module or the day.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points there. And it's the same in the actual physical classroom, isn't it? That it's so important that we as teachers give that example of how important it is to be respectful of other people's time, to run to some sort of a timetable, and to give people an idea of what to expect and what's expected of them. Guidelines, it always comes back to that. You know, if you've got a sign on your classroom door that says, please remove your shoes, you save everybody so much stress, right? Instead of people looking in going, oh, some people have got their shoes on, are you supposed to take your shoes off? You know, when we give people clear guidelines around what we expect, then they know what's expected of them. So if we're telling people that they need to show up on time, I think the biggest problem I've ever had teaching on Zoom, which I love too, is people turning up on time. That if it's going to be 9 o'clock, you really need to be there at 9 o'clock. That rocking in at 5 past or 10 past 9 isn't okay, just like it isn't okay in the classroom. For me, that is because I do not want to get started when I know I haven't got my whole class there, because I don't want them to miss out, because I feel like if they walk in after I've already been speaking for 5 or 10 minutes, they're not going to have any context. So I, as a teacher, am not able to give them the quality of a teaching experience that I want to give them. Right. So I could say, oh, well, they've missed that part, and, you know, they'll just have to catch up, or, you know, watch the recording if there is one, or something like that, or maybe I could catch up with them later. But it's a personal thing for me as a teacher. It's like how can they interpret my dance if they haven't seen the whole thing right from the beginning, you know? So for me, that is a really important thing, to show up on time. And of course, there's lots of ways that we can do that. You know, we can make it really clear to people that if they're not going to be able to be there on time, that they do need to email us, so that we know, because if we know that person's going to be 10 minutes late for whatever reason, or they're not going to come today, well, then we just get started, and that's how it is, rather than just have to sit there and wait for somebody. But I usually do make a pretty big deal about please being there on time. And of course, then that means we have to make sure we are absolutely there on time.
Yeah.
So
I have that in my guidelines too. And I also say to my students, I'm always online 10 minutes beforehand, because I do, and I set up and then I'm always available half an hour after class in case that you need to have a one-on-one with me as well. And I do say that I do start on time, and the same thing if someone's late. And what I normally do if someone is running late, I put the others into a breathing technique or meditation or quick yoga nidra.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. That's a great idea. In that way, you're keeping your people who have turned up on time engaged and giving them value for their time without actually starting the class without the other person. So that's a really great idea. I really like that too. It's good to hear other teachers' tips and techniques. That's fantastic. So yeah, so guidelines, I would have to say, if I was going to advise anybody on, starting to teach on Zoom, first is getting to know Zoom. Now, in this particular course, in the training and assessment course, which this video is a major part of, and also it's going to be part of the induction program for new teachers that are new training providers. So if you're doing the training and assessment program while you're watching this video, you'll find there's a lot of technical information in the module about how to use Zoom, like the whiteboard and the breakout rooms and things like that, because what Julianne and I really hear about is about the teaching techniques. And I think that first part about guidelines is the most important thing. And I guess one of the other things, the second thing is what we talked about earlier, is like, how are you going to actually deliver the information without it being boring or humdrum, and without just like going through the monologue. I really like what you've just said about sharing it with people prior to them coming, so that your class is more about a discussion. And I really like that. I think it's good too, because people want to talk. They want to have their say, and it's really important to give people an opportunity to do that. So how do you make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk? How do you do that? How do you pass the talking stick around on Zoom?
Okay, so I go around and I'm going to give you an example. We did the drama triangle today, which was actually really quite intense, and the students got a lot out of it, but a lot of actually came up as well. So we did a lot of when have you been in the persecutor role? When have you been in the victim role? When have you been in the rescuer role? And then I just go around, whoever's on my left or right, and they ask the next person, but they actually do have permission to pass as well. So I actually give them permission to pass. So let's just say Betty's next to me. I'll just go round and then I go the opposite way. So so that's how I do it. But then I just give people the empowerment to actually pass, because as I teach them too, you want to give that to your students and clients, the empowerment to pass, because sometimes they're just trying to digest it all and articulate and probably feel what they're actually feeling before that they get the confidence to actually say. And normally they actually come back and then what they want to share.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really important in any classroom, physical or Zoom classroom, is to make sure there's that. I guess that's another thing that we would consider putting in our guidelines right at the start, that during the whole course, if there's any point in time when you don't want to answer a question, that it's okay to say pass, no questions asked, we keep moving. And you're right, oftentimes it happens that by the time you get back around to the end, they're ready now. They're ready. They just weren't ready then. Sometimes too, yes, going through like who's there and whose turn is it to talk. I often too like to keep a list of the students' names and ask them, sort of tick off when I've asked them to speak and so on, because sometimes, students move around on the page. On the screen, they might be like, they're like that, and then somebody might change their video settings or something, and now they're down there. And I always have this horror of not having asked someone, like that. There might be this quiet little person that's thinking, oh, she didn't ask me, and just I never know, So I really like to do that, and also to kind of keep a roll, if you like, to sort of like see who's turning up, because if you've got quite a few people in your class, it can be easy to not realize someone hasn't shown up. So yeah, that's really good. Do you get them to wave at you or put their hand
Yeah.
up if they want to say something?
Yeah, I get them to do hearts and stuff when someone's sharing stuff. If you want to send love to the person, or you really get like that. The hearts, I get like claps, like as well too. Claps. Sometimes they do the hands on.
Namaste hands. Yes, you can get them. They're sort of further.
Yeah, so sometimes they do that. Thumbs up. When I was doing this, and I've taught the certificate in meditation teaching, training and holistic human development all on Zoom too. So I used to get all the students to do the activities too in class. So they all had, how they have to write their scripts, the creative visualization scripts. That's in module 3. I gave them all a chance to teach on Zoom. So they had to organize their music and their script, and they actually ran all of us through the meditation actually on Zoom. So it gave them the chance to step into the teaching role as well. And they had to do and the relaxation meditations. So that was throughout their course. So that was actually really, really interesting. And even chair yoga, they all had to run a chair yoga class, a 5-minute chair yoga class, and they had to do a speech on what body part and the benefits. And that was really, really, really powerful. And it gave them the confidence to really step in to teach on Zoom.
Yeah, that's a really great idea, because it's not just us who's now needing to teach more on Zoom. Once these people graduate and become practitioners, they're often going to need to run their own groups and workshops and counselling sessions or whatever it is that they're doing on Zoom as well. So having that experience that they're gaining from you teaching them how to use Zoom, that's super important. Yeah. Do you think, Julianne, that when you first started out on Zoom, when you first began teaching on Zoom, do you think you've come a long way?
Yeah. I actually love teaching on Zoom so much. It's just, I don't know, it's just different. It's more, I still drop into it. So I drop into my whole entire classroom to say to my teachers and my students, I'm just behind a screen. The only thing you can't do is you can't touch me, but I'm still the same. I believe that I actually have it's really defined me as a teacher a lot more.
Yeah.
We've got a thunderstorm coming.
Oh.
So it's defined me as a teacher on how to reach my students in a more soulful way, with them being behind the screen, and how to hold space for them so that they actually evolve and grow and embrace the wisdom and knowledge, and they have the confidence to go out and teach on they'll be able to teach on Zoom, and they'll be able to. One of my students is running amazing women's circles and sound healings on Zoom, because she was given the knowledge and the gifts to be able to feel confident to do it. And that was just from doing the meditations and the chair yoga and stuff.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. I love that. So I guess if we were going to give people a few final tips on summing up what we've just talked about today, that we would say the most important things are: 1, getting to know Zoom and feeling confident in using Zoom yourself. 2, guidelines, making sure you've got your guidelines really clear and discussing those with your class, because it is really important that the class be part of creating guidelines. They work much better than when you give someone a list and go, here's the guidelines, this is how it's going to be. When you create those guidelines as a group, people are much more inclined to uphold them themselves. And I think another thing that I'd say about guidelines that's really important is that we've got to remember, and I've talked about this a lot in the past, is guidelines are about how to behave, not who to be. So we can teach people that by saying, when they say things like, I want the guideline to be no one can be judgmental, we can't tell people what to think in their head. Right, we can tell them not to have your mobile phone on, or not to slurp your cereal while you. And I've had people do that. Come to a Zoom meeting eating. It's like, but it's a new culture, and so defining what's rude and what's not rude is what we have to do. because we can't assume that everybody's just going to think the same way as us, because there could be a teacher watching this now that thinks, well, what's wrong with that? Because we all have different requirements in our classroom, and that's okay. So guidelines, thinking about the course material and how you're going to deliver it, whether you're going to send it along like you like to do beforehand and come and have a discussion, whether you want them to go off and read it and come and give you a presentation, like to really think about what's the most creative, interactive, fun way that you can get people to absorb and read and take in the actual content of that module. And then there's the practical way, how you're going to do the practical stuff, whether it's each person doing a guided meditation, like you've said with the meditation, or whether it's people going off and doing their painting and then coming back and showing it. When I was teaching HiCAT on Zoom at one point in time, we kept the cameras on while people did painting. We kept it muted so that it was quiet, but I was there, and occasionally someone would come on and just quickly want to ask me something, but we kept it muted. But it was really interesting that people could see each other, and for some people it was just like the top of their head like this, but for some people you could just really, there was just something really connective and special and intimate even about sitting together doing art. Even though we're in different places, we were still together. So thinking about that kind of thing, and then thinking about how your students feel valued and heard and connected with via Zoom. Is there any others that you'd add to that, Julianne?
To keep it real, keep being yourself and be authentic, but really, really class plan. I can't speak enough about class planning and asking yourself, going through the theory and say, what is the wisdom that the students really, really need to go through and really, really unpack? Like the fight or flight response, I go through that, I unpack it big time. Same as the drama triangle, today, that's what we just focused on. We read it all and then we unpacked it as well. And we went through all the different roles and stuff, because they need to understand that fully, because it's going to make them become amazing therapists, and actually they're going to change probably a lot in their life on seeing other people's behaviours and stuff.
Yeah, the drama triangle's pretty potent.
Yeah, and so just having every module completely different, because every module should be sort of like the theory can be actually taught completely different. And same as the activities, it's how when we did the sound healing and Sat Nam and all of that, we did an open chant through Zoom, and you know what, it was absolutely amazing. And I got all the students to bring their sound bowls. So we actually all did a sound healing, and that was their sound bath. So it's just getting outside of the box and asking yourself as a teacher, how can I deliver this wisdom and knowledge so that students are going to be able to adapt it, understand it, absorb it, and they're going to be able to teach it and hold space for others.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Julianne. I'm so grateful for you spending time with me today and for being so willing to pass on all your beautiful wisdom that you've acquired over all of these years and through your own heart-centered journey as a teacher. I'm so grateful to you being so willing to share that with everybody else who's going out there to be a teacher too. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.